By the end of this video, you will see why weathering Gunpla is not just about tools and paint, but more about perception from your viewer's standpoint. Not enough weathering? No visual interest. Too much weathering? Unrealistic. Let's figure out how to strike a balance.
Hi everyone, Rusty here. In the last two videos, we talked about the importance of value and color temperature. We've seen how that can be applied on the leg and hip section of the Zaku 1. And for those who haven't seen parts 1 and 2 yet, I would recommend you check it out after watching this video. If you need a quick refresher or don't intend to view it, the TLDR version of part 1, contrast in value, is making sure that your base coat has a variety of highlight and shadows placed appropriately so that it shows off the form of your model. This means that your viewer knows where each panel starts and ends. The TLDR version of part 2, color temperature, is knowing that different hues evoke a subjective feeling of warmth or coolness in the viewer. The application of this knowledge comes in when you decide to go for a contrast between warm highlights and cool shadows, or vice versa, and stay consistent throughout the model. The added bonus here is also learning how to retain the saturation of your color when you lighten or darken it. For these first two parts, they mostly relate to painting the base coat of our model. And as usual, I'll need to do the same for this arm section of the Zaku 1, which is the star of the show for today. Now let's move on to the topic of today's video, which is contrast between organic and inorganic shapes and lines.
Right, this one's pretty obvious. Have a look at the shoulder armor. Boring, isn't it? Just a couple of streaks and edge chipping applied. The issue with this is not that the streaks or the edge chipping is bad, but rather the fact that there aren't any organic shapes present to balance out all these vertical and horizontal lines. It's like doing a painting of a cityscape, and it's all vertical lines, horizontal lines. And one reason why trees and people are usually added to urban paintings is to introduce organic shapes, so the entire work doesn't get covered with straight lines which look rather artificial. If you look at churches, famous buildings where they use arches to introduce some curves and break away from that boring, squarish, rectangular doors and windows, it's the same idea here. If we're going for natural, realistic weathering, then we need natural realistic shapes.
Just a side note here, I'll readily admit that my style of weathering may not be considered realistic to many people. If you want to take these videos as a reference for your own work, then you have to be aware that I don't take into account any maintenance that the repair crew may have done between battles. Which means that all the light dust and dark grime effect may have been removed periodically. So the effect that you see here is a bit exaggerated. I also don't consider the scale of the model too much. So this is a 1:144 scale model, which is quite small. The areas like the shoulders, knees and feet are much more likely to have wear and tear that are visible in this scale. However, the chipping effect around hard to reach areas such as the chest or head would logically be more subdued. Meaning to say that the chipping effect in these areas may not be seen if shrunk down to scale. For me, I apply just enough chipping to suggest what the form of the model is and stop there, even if it means that my representation of this Zaku 1 makes it seem as if the chipped edges on the chest or the head are several feet wide in real life, which some may say is unrealistic. All that being said, I think it's just a matter of finding a balance between what you find aesthetically pleasing and realism. Alright, back to the issue at hand here. I have too many inorganic shapes and lines, right?
To solve this issue, we need some good chipping effects, and chipping needs to be natural looking. It can't look like teeth where everything is sharp. It can't look like clouds where there isn't a distinct shape. Everything is just too wavy. For me, I combine sponge chipping with a paintbrush to create a variety of small, medium and large paint chips. But to take it to the next level, you need references and practice. As usual, I would suggest that majority of chipping effects go to the edges to communicate to the viewer where the panels start and end. The exceptions being the shield, or shoulder and knee armor, because these areas generally have more chipping in the middle due to its use. There's also one more benefit to placing chipping effects on the edges. By placing organic shapes, such as chipping, right on top of the inorganic edges, which is largely made of vertical and horizontal lines, you are actually softening the lines, or at least that's how it's perceived anyway. It's kind of similar to when you want to apply battle damage to your model and you use a hobby knife to create gouges by directly removing pieces of plastic from the edge of a shield or a protruding part like a zaku shoulder spike. To create convincing battle damage, you literally cut out the plastic that are arranged in an artificial fashion like a 90 degrees or at an acute angle. And once you're done, the angles and the edges are softer and rounder. Of course, admittedly, you could have broken armor plate with sharp edges, but it's not like it's made of glass and broke into numerous shards. So I digress. When you paint chips on edges, although you're not physically changing the form of the model like you would with a hobby knife, you're visually changing how the eye perceives this same line. So if you do chipping right, the edges are not only enhanced due to the contrast in value, but also softened at the same time because of the randomness in your chipping. The viewer's eye can take in the information that you're giving regarding the form of the model without it being too striking, which often happens with inorganic shapes. There's a reason why road signs use triangles, circles, and rectangles, right? These signs are meant to catch your attention amidst the chaos of driving. Now imagine instead of your usual 2 to 3 signs on the road, there are 15 or 20 signs on that same road. In this case, it's much harder to pay attention to all of them because they're all trying to grab your attention and convey a specific information. So if you've been driving on a busy highway with many exits and intersections, each with their own signs, then you know exactly what I mean. To conclude this section, step back and look at your own work critically. When you see inorganic shapes, they function as if they were signs on the road, a visual interest, something that attracts attention. Ideally, you want them spaced out so that it doesn't look too crowded. If you can't space them out, like in the case of the armor panels, then use some natural chipping with organic shapes to soften them and bring balance back to your work. Right, so we've come to the end of this 3-part series. To summarize, try and apply contrast to your model and think flexibly about this concept because contrast comes in different ways. You can have a broad range of value. You can have a difference in warm and cool tones, a variety of shapes and lines which the human brain will interpret as weathering. I hope you found this video helpful. Please let me know what you think, and if you have any questions or ideas for a future video, drop a comment and we can go from there. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.